All right. If everyone would stand, please, we'll call this special meeting to order. At this time, we have a word of silence. Thank you. If you would now turn and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Make sure your mics are on when you're talking, please, and when you're not. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the City Council Budget Work Session for today's Thursday, April 17th, 2025. The purpose of this is to give this council some background as to what are some of the asks by some of our departments, their needs, and you can hear from them as they talk about this. But this, again, I want to remind you, this is not the final end or the final budget. There's still be some things to be considered. There will be some more presentations that will be given later on and that you will be hearing from, and there will still have some other meetings to attend that will involve the budget, so that this still will be a work in progress. And after this meeting today, you can, if you have some, it gives you an opportunity to weigh in. You can, if you have questions or if you got some input, you may do that at that particular time. So up until the first reading of this budget ordinance coming up, and then even after that, you still have a little bit of time between then. So, so at this time, I'm going to bring it up Stacy, who's up. Oh, I'm sorry, my bad. Let's have a roll call.
Okay. Ms. Wilkins-Brent?
Here.
Mr. Crisp?
Here.
Ms. Hambrick?
Present.
Mr. Hampton? Mr. Menke?
Present.
Ms. Lesby Mitchell? Here. Ms. Tingle-Sames? Mr. Stone?
All right, before I bring you up, Stacy, I got to follow this agenda a little bit. So the next one is the approval of minutes for April 14, 2025. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Motion made by Ms. Brandt. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second made by Mr. Crisp. Are there further questions or comments? All those in favor of this motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Let the record reflect the motion passed. Now, at this time, to follow the agenda, as written, item number 4, the 2025-26 budget discussion. And as you can see, all those items that are listed in order. And I'll bring Stacy up to come up and talk a little bit about, lead the way on this.
Excuse me. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So the first thing I want to do is we go to the first slide and talk about, this is our agenda for the day. We're going to talk about the assumptions that are throughout the entire budget. We're going to go through each of the departmental requests, the interlocal departments' budgets, our other general fund items, the preliminary revenue projections, and talk about a couple of the other special revenue funds. But before we jump into the assumptions, I just wanted to talk about the process a little bit, since we have a couple of new council members. After January, February, we kind of start in data gathering mode. We give our departments time to formulate their request, give them time to enter those. Usually they get everything turned into us by the end of March. In the meantime, we're gathering data from the interlocal agencies, the county, developing our general fund budget projections, looking over revenue, trying to see what the needs are and what the climate of the city is to try to make the best projections of revenue and everything else going forward. Once we bring all that together, as we gather data, it comes to the Finance Committee. Sometimes those meetings are a little more in the weeds. The data's a little more dense because they're kind of getting it as it comes in. When we bring it to you all at this first work session, which we really just started doing these budget work sessions, I think a couple of years ago. We had not done these in the past. It's not a requirement, but it's an opportunity for you all to hear the department's request, to ask questions. And again, as the mayor said, from now until the first reading, he can listen to your all's feedback, and it may help him inform how he develops his proposed budget that will be presented to you on May 12th. And then once the final proposed budget is presented, a couple weeks later, right after Memorial Day, we will have first reading. At that point, he will have considered all the input from the Finance Committee as an advisory committee, the other council members, and he will present that first reading, and then after 2 readings, council will have the opportunity to vote for or against the budget that he presents. I know there's definitely been some questions, some talk about strategic planning, big pictures, and I think that is something certainly Devin and the mayor are looking to for the future. For this year, this process has been similar to what it has been in our past budgets, trying to look at, do we have enough revenue to meet the needs? Obviously, our department have a lot of requests. We always ask them to advocate for what they need, and you saw a little bit of that this past Monday when police and 911 presented their departmental overview, and you'll get to hear from a few more departments at the next meeting, and then some reports from a couple others that won't do the formal presentation, but will provide you with a report, some of the smaller departments. So I'm going to jump into the budget assumptions on the next slide, and we will talk about things that kind of affect the budget as a whole, whether it be general fund or others. As sent to us by the Department of Local Government for the elected officials, the rate of inflation or cost of living for elected officials was 2.9% in January, and the mayor right now is considering and planning to recommend a 2.9% COLA in this budget. So what that will do with our new step schedule, employees will receive a total 2.9% increase. So if their step is 2.2 and the COLA is 2.9, they will get their step, and then all of the numbers on the chart will change by that additional 0.7% for a total 2.9% increase. So that is how that step scale was developed. That's how it was implemented. This is our first year, obviously, going through a COLA with the new step scale, so we are still evaluating. Yes? Did you have a question?
Yeah, so do we have a copy of the step schedule?
I can get a copy for you,
Okay.
because I have already applied those increases so that you can see it.
So, Stacy, just to clarify,
Yes.
the step schedule is not higher than 2.9.
I'm sorry?
It's not higher than 2.9.
No.
So everybody will get 2.9.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there's a unified scale and then a public safety scale. The public safety scale is only for fire and police. Every other position falls under the unified scale. And those steps are between 2.2 to 2.4%, depending. But ultimately, everyone will receive a 2.9% increase, which is a combination of their step and then just the difference to make up
Right.
to the 2.9.
So what's the purpose of the step then? If the cost of living increase that's being put out is across the board, then what's the intent of the step?
Absence a cost of living adjustment from the Department of Local Government. So if inflation was 0, every employee would still receive their step.
Okay,
So the step would be the minimum given
okay.
in a year, unless council chose to freeze the scale for some reason, if there was a economic reason to not do that. But
So the step is, if there is no COLA, that's when the step
Yes.
program goes into effect?
Yes.
Or if the COLA is less than their step.
well, we won't reduce the step. So if it's 2.2, unless
Right.
council were to take action to freeze the step scale for a year and not, I know school districts have done that in the past. I've worked in a school district before where they've frozen everyone on their current step because they didn't have the resources to give a raise. Short of that, yes.
So is all that in the step information?
Part of the comp study policy that was implemented, so the adopted I guess it wasn't called a policy necessarily, but the implementation of the comp study notes how to administer the step schedule essentially. So the purpose behind going to that model was a lot for forecasting and planning.
Sure.
It's a recruiting tool, but also it's a promotional tool. So
Right.
if you know that you're on step 7 of 307, and if you promote to sergeant, for example, you know
Right.
that when you go to 310, here's where you'll start. So it's that ability for folks to plan for, and like we said, kind of worst case scenario, assuming nothing crazy happens, I know that if I stay here for 7 years in my same role, I will make at least this much money. So it's a personal budgeting tool, but also,
Right.
we can be flexible with it. Ultimately, you can change the policy of how it's implemented too, right? If we all of a sudden are flush, we can apply cost of living adjustments, in excess of, or in addition to the step. So
Sure.
there's flexibility there for how the mayor and future councils want to administer that program.
And I think also the reason for having this STEP program is, when you're trying to hire people in, people want to know where they're going to be in the next few years. And it's also good for retention, and that there was also some compression issues that we was trying to address through this program too with that.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. And as this slide says, the cost of the 2.9% increase, which includes retirement, Social Security, Medicare-related benefits, is just under $575,000. However, the Kentucky Public Pension Authority has adopted the new employer contribution rates for CERS, which is the retirement system that all of the city employees contribute to. We have hazardous employees, police and fire. Everyone else is considered non-hazardous. So the hazardous rate, the percentage of salary that we, the city, have to contribute to the retirement fund, the hazardous rate is decreasing from 38.61 to 35.73, and the non-hazardous rate is decreasing from 19.71 to 18.62. So had salaries remained stagnant, that's a savings of $300,000. So that helps offset some of that COLA increase as well.
So are those 100% funded for our folks?
The city funds 100% of its contributions. I cannot speak to what the current funding level is for the plan as a whole at the moment. I can find that information, but all cities are required to fund their contributions at 100%. There may be other agencies such as the state that don't, but we are always required to fund it 100%.
Just
Yes.
the city, that's all.
Yes. Just making a note of that. The next thing is property and liability insurance. Obviously, Patrick works to maintain claims as best he can, but the cost of repairs, if we do have property damage, some liability claims on the legal side. So just the initial run was to increase that by 10%. I'll review that a little bit more with Patrick to make sure that we're covered, and if we can reduce that, I will. But that was just the initial, because we have had some high claims, especially on the liability and property side. Our medical self-insurance fund, we came back in the mid-year amendment, asked council to approve an additional $500,000 contribution to that fund to get us back to even, because we'd had some large claim years. Our third-party administrator, Assured Partners, has gone ahead and reviewed what our expected claims, what our stop loss insurance cost will be for the upcoming calendar year. Our benefits run on a calendar year. And they have adjusted what we contribute per plan, per employee, to reflect those expected increased costs of about 9.5%. So those new fully insured equivalents, is what we call it, are applied in this budget. So that should help get us funded appropriately in that, and hopefully not have to make any extra contributions outside of the payroll funding. And just a reminder at the end, we will update this more. You'll see a more of an update and focus on this at the main budget presentation in May. But we did adopt the fund balance policy that it is a desired minimum fund balance in the general fund of 30% of our operating revenues or expenses, whichever's higher. So this year our expenses were higher, and 30% of our operating expenses was approximately $13 million. So that is our desired amount to keep on reserve, a rainy day fund. And of course, if council chooses, to dip into that, we can that can be discussed. That policy can be adjusted really at any time with one vote. It was a municipal order, so it was not an ordinance. So if we get in a situation where we feel like we need to, for capital purposes, use additional funding, that's something council can vote on and change. Next, we're going to go through each department. I want to refer to two things, and I want to apologize. I tried to get the page numbers on here, and when I put the footer on, they were under the numbers, and I ran out of time to get them on there. But we are not going to go through this line item report, but I do want to just kind of tell you what this is. This is what our accounting chart of accounts looks like. So when you're looking through this on your own in your own time, you will see the headers on the left. You're starting with the general fund, and then you have the revenues for the general fund, and you'll see a header for each department so that you know which department you're looking at. Eventually, you'll get to a page break. You'll see the 911 fund, alcohol fund, and so on. So you will see those headers, and it's just in order of our chart of accounts. But all of this information in the line item report is rolled up into the PowerPoint, so we are going to focus on the PowerPoint today. And if I need to call back to something or somebody has a question that I need to refer to the line item report, I will. Our first department is building inspection. For each department, we will have a staffing slide so that you can see their current authorized staffing. This does not reflect vacancies. They may have vacancies, but this is the amount of personnel that they are authorized to have by the personnel ordinance adopted by council. And then you will see the requested staffing for the upcoming year and whether there's an increase or decrease. So, building inspection currently has total staffing of 6, and they are requesting an additional permit technician. The permit technician is one of their office roles who does all of the intake. Obviously, they are expecting a much higher volume of permits in the upcoming years with all of the new projects coming online. They feel that this will be very beneficial to them. The new permit technician will cost $82,800 for the full compensation package. So salary, health benefits, retirement, etc. And you did have a memo from Jim in the packet that was sent via email talking about how permits have increased over the several years. So,
And if anybody wants a printed copy of that packet up there, council, just let me know.
that was
It's the-
supplemental
it was
information.
supplemented after the email went out. It's just the background information that is kind of
If you were
framing
at
all the
Finance Committee,
requests.
you received it. It's just a copy of the memos from the departments. So again, I'm not going to refer back to that today, but you have that for supplemental information to back up the PowerPoint as you go through it later. We're going to go to the next slide. So I have broken each department out by current year budget, next year budget, salaries and benefits, operating, capital, and then if there are any other items. And to the side, I have tried to note new capital items, significant budgetary request. So for building inspection, the total budget request for 2026 is $977,431, which is an $80,400 increase from last year. As you can see, the salaries and benefits have increased due to the COLA and then also due to the new position. And the capital has decreased because we had some projects at the 125 West Clinton office this year, and we are not doing any, they have not requested any capital projects for the upcoming year. They're going to delay those for another year just to see if there's any movement in the future about other locations where they might be able to go. For capital, they just want to replace 2 vehicles, so that'll be a replace of 2 leases continuing rolling over with the fleet program. As mentioned, they're deferring capital improvements on 125 West Clinton until next year. And the operating notes, the increases are mainly due to the new position and the property liability insurance, professional services, and utilities increasing. And just a couple notes on building inspection. They're our closest department to being self-sufficient other than 911 dispatch now, but we've projected a conservative initial amount of $700,000 for permit revenue. So you can see with expenses of $977, they're expecting to bring in around $700,000. I'll fine tune that with Jim a little bit, but that was his first conservative estimate on building permits for the next year. And we did follow up. There was a question from Finance Committee, and we did follow up with him on the fee schedule that was updated a couple of years ago. He feels the fee schedule is still reasonable and in line with other jurisdictions around us, but we will continue to evaluate that as needed periodically. But Jim felt that that was still in line with other jurisdictions. Any questions about building inspection? Okay. So, yeah, go ahead.
So this one is split with the?
Yes, this is an interlocal department split 50-50. So there is a revenue line item for the county's portion of this budget.
And this is the total, not just ours?
Yes, this is the total. Ours would be half of that. And of course, we also give half of the revenue to the county
Sure.
as well, so we remit that to them. Okay, next will be police department. You got a preview of this one Monday night, but we will go ahead and go through it again. Their current authorized staffing is 89. Their requested staffing is 98, an increase of 9, and we will talk about those positions. The first thing that they are requesting is a new captain position. The current captain is very overloaded, and so they are requesting some additional help at the top for an operations captain to help divide those duties. And the total estimated cost of that position is $174,600. Of course, it will depend on who promotes into that position, but that is an estimate based on a similar salary and benefits. With lieutenants, it is showing authorized and requested as 6 because the personnel ordinance authorizes 6 lieutenants. For the past several, 5 to 7 probably years at least, a lieutenant has been serving as the supervisor for the 911 center directly, spending most of their time there. You'll see when we get to dispatch, and as mentioned in their presentations, the goal is for that lieutenant position to come back into the police department. So it is not an increase in staffing, however, it is an increase to their budget. And to restore that lieutenant position to PD is approximately $147,500. That will be added into their budget.
So Stacy?
Yes.
Just for clarification, so the lieutenant, when was at 911 or dispatch, so would that part with the county paying half of that, or were we still paying?
We will go from the lieutenant, when they were serving under dispatch, was funded by dispatch, so that salary was split. Now that that lieutenant will be coming back into police department, that is a city-only department, so obviously we will be funding the full $147,500. When we get to 911, you'll see we're replacing that with a civilian position that will be funded 50-50, but the police department has requested to have their lieutenant back in their operations fully. The next thing they are requesting is 5 full-time police officers. You've heard a lot of talk about the study we did in 2019 and how when we initially did that, there was the discussion of needing to add 5 officers per year. I think since then, we've added around 13 to 15, officers since maybe 2020. It may be.
But something around there.
So they continue to request 5 officers per year. We were able to make that happen this fiscal year. We gave them 3 in the initial budget and then just approved a new personnel ordinance at the last meeting that gives them additional 2. So for fiscal year 25, we did make the 5 happen, and they're requesting that again for fiscal year 26. And the cost of each police officer is approximately $119,535 for a total of just under $600,000, about $597,675. And then, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So based on the study, how many are we short today? Was there a plan to get there?
I won't answer the first part of that question. I'll let Chief come answer that question. But the second part of the question, the plan to get there was the part that stalled. So the first step in that plan, that kind of profile of revenue recommendations, was the 911 fee. And I believe coinciding was the insurance premium tax increase from 5 to 8%. So those were two pretty significant measures taken, and the 911 fee has been a wonderful, resource to essentially free up, how much is dispatch's budget?
I think it pays for about 1.5 to 1.6 million.
So 1.5-ish million general fund revenues relieved, and then the insurance premium tax revenue, that's been significant as well. So great steps made. We reached that point in the process, and there were some other conversations about gross receipts versus net profits, and then we hit the COVID wall and never picked that study back up. So that 5 for 5 years was a goal of, getting 25 new officers, and trying to keep up with both existing deficiencies and growing population. So obviously it's always a moving target. If you need 10 more officers today and you don't do anything for 5 years, you're not going to need 10 officers. You're going to need, so I won't, like I said, I can defer to Chief if he wants to talk about where the deficit is in terms of head count from their position right now, but that's what happened on the revenue side, and that's the piece that really does need picked back up, and it will be part of the conversation going into the budget presentation, just about where our revenues are lacking from the mayor's perspective and the office's perspective, and what kind of things we can do to meet that gap. So that will be part of the conversation when the mayor's budget is presented as, as the
And I
final
do
budget.
know during Monday night's presentation, I don't know the number that they're short, but obviously I know Chief mentioned that since 2019, we were at 1.69 officers per 1,000 residents. We're still 1.7, so even though we've added head count, the population growth has kept track with the head count that we've added, so we're still in the same place we were 6 years ago when you compare it to per 1,000 residents. So, after the police officers, the next thing they are requesting is 2 safety officers. They talked about this in their presentation. These would be non-sworn positions, non-hazardous retirement positions that could handle some minor traffic calls, directing traffic, I think motorist assist. Chief went over it. I won't go over it all again. But those safety officers are each expected to cost around $96,400 for a total of $192,800. And lastly, they've really stressed the need with the body-worn camera program, especially the increase in volume of their open records, in addition to getting some support for their detectives in the CIS division, a crime analyst / open records clerk, that with total compensation package would be about $96,400. So that is an additional increase in staffing of 9, although they will feel the impact of 10 because the lieutenant will be coming back to them. Any questions about police department staffing before we look at the numbers? Okay. Next, on the police operating and capital budget, you can see the total fiscal year 26 requested is $15,482,434. It is an increase of $3,047,961 over the previous year, with the majority of that being in personnel. Again, insurance, building maintenance, vehicle maintenance, and motor fuel were all expenses that increased on the operating side. There were a few expenses that decreased. I didn't make a note of it in here, but they are requesting an increase to their overtime budget for it to be a total of $800,000. After we made the mid-year amendment, that budget was $571,000. So that's about a $229,000 increase. So we're in conversations with them about that. They estimated their overtime hours for this year. With their estimated overtime hours for this year at next year's estimated overtime rate, you're looking at about $700,000. So that's one of the things we'll continue to talk to them about. Again, that would be if overtime hours stayed stagnant at the new rate, it would be $700,000. So.
And I think that probably counsel that, sometimes you and I think we discussed it even the police committee, is that, when we have the officers who's been selected as candidates to go to the training in Richmond, if 3 or 4 officers go there, we're not going to get them for about another 6 to 9 months. So if you don't have enough people to cover those gaps, you still got to cover them. You still got to have police protection no matter where you are. So if you're behind the 8 ball anyway, and those 6 or whatever you have is going to Richmond, then the problem is that you're going to end up still having overtime. That's one of the reasons I think they talked about is having that overtime budget. But we want to hope to address that as we continue to talk further on that.
It's an ongoing conversation, whether or not they may be able to reduce those hours next year, perhaps in the future, but again, that will be dependent on staffing and whether or not they have enough staffing to handle calls without overtime. So we'll continue to look at that. Yes.
So I just want to confirm what I heard.
Yes.
So the amount of overtime that's in the budget currently is reflective of everything that has been done for the current year, plus the addition that we made.
Yes, the
last
571
correction.
is after the budget amendment. That's what the current budget is,
Okay.
after the amendment. And they're requesting next year's budget to be 800,000 for overtime. The capital request, you can see on the right, they are requesting architectural fee for a needs assessment, as they talked about, I think in their presentation. We knew when we built the police station back in 2014 that there was kind of an area outlined where a future expansion might go, and as they've talked about, they've got doubled up and using closets and everything they can. So we just kind of want to potentially get that conversation started about what a future expansion might look like. Just a needs assessment, no physical plans at this time. Again, they've requested the parking lot expansion. They put $99,600 in for that. Traffic unit, thanks to council for establishing the 3 officers for the traffic unit. They have requested some additional equipment to go along with that. You can read more detail about that equipment in the memos that were emailed. Cameras and access control for the building, portable radios, mobile radios. Obviously, as we add officers, we need to purchase additional radios. The repairs and replacement of radios is covered under our big agreement with AMK, but not the purchase of new radios we still have to do. A vehicle repeater, which is related to the communications and radio equipment, and then council has already approved their 26 fleet order. So we will be, once we get those numbers and final quotes back from Joseph E., those will be added in here. Any questions about police operating and capital? Okay. Next, we're going to move on and talk about fire department staffing. And as you can see, their current authorized staffing is 58.5, because they do have part-time clerical staff. They have requested 6 additional firefighters. I'm sure they're going to talk about this more in their presentation on the 28th, but a firefighter is about $121,260. A total of 6 is approximately $727,560. And I don't want to steal all their thunder, but their logic behind this is to go ahead and start hiring some additional firefighters. Number one, immediately they can help cover when there's sick, vacation. They do hope that this could help maybe alleviate some of their overtime instead of having to call someone else back in who's already been on shift. They would have extra coverage. Additionally, this would give these 6 time to be trained while we could seek potentially a safer grant for the other 6 that might be needed for future station if council starts that path. So they just wanted to go ahead, and they haven't asked for this for a couple of years, but it's not something new. I remember as long as 5 years ago, they were trying to start asking to add 2 or 3 a year to start building towards that station, and we're still here. We still haven't started adding that staff for them. We have added things like putting the fire inspector back, the battalion officer or training officer, the part-time clerical staff, but just the firefighters, we have not just added, on and apparatus firefighters in that time. So
what was the salary of a firefighter?
Total compensation package is $121,260. And then it looks like they've requested 6. And I will, any questions about fire department staffing? Okay. we will move on to the next slide and talk about their operating and capital budgets. The fiscal year 2026 request from the fire department is $16,608,293. This is an increase of $6.2 million. We're going to talk about that number. There's a couple of things making up a big chunk of that. For salaries and benefits, obviously you have the COLA, and then they did increase their overtime by $50,000 from $200 to $250, because even if they are given the new officers, they will have an extended period for a training class, and they're also expecting some retirements, most likely August 1st. So they would have a training class in the fall until they get that training class through. They would still have some overtime. For operating, there was a $300,000 increase to professional services for architectural fees. They put it in their professional services. And in conjunction with that, the biggest piece of the capital that you see, they went ahead and put the full $4 million in the line item, which would be if we paid cash estimate for the fire station. And again, I know they're going to talk about a lot of this on the 28th, so I don't want to steal their thunder, but the general idea of this is if we can go ahead and develop plans. We have schematic plans for a Station 4. These could be flexible plans that we could put out to bid for, whether it be the east side or the west side. The location is not, have been made on a final determination, but the plans could be adapted to either site. So it would be a similar looking station, much like Stations 2 and 3, similar layout. One has a basement, so depending on the lay of the land. The west side, obviously, we know we would have utility work, additional site work, whereas the east side, going by EMS station, that one's a little more ready to go. So, but a plan that could be flexible. Typically, architectural fees, they've estimated about 8% of the building cost, and then a little bit of cushion for if we were able to modify those plans for 2 different stations. And again, yes.
I have a question. Should we decide to go ahead with that,
Mm-hmm.
would the full $4 million be necessary in the
No.
budget year?
No, I left that in because this is what was requested, and that's what they put in their request, and I honor that by leaving it in here. The general timeline would be, if this budget is approved, right now it's slated for second reading at the second meeting in June. So assuming the budget is approved at that second reading, we would go out, do a request for qualifications for an architectural firm. That's about a 3-week process, and then council approval, probably 3, 4, or 5 months to develop plans, because we would have to decide on a site at that point and develop our plans towards a specific site. So you're looking at probably by December before we would have any plans. Then we could potentially go out to bid early, in 2026. But at that point, if we had a set of plans, if council was ready for us to put that out to bid and ready to award a construction contract, you would be looking at mobilization, stored materials, some site work. I believe they got an estimate from the architect that it would be about 35% potentially if we had 3 to 4 months of work. That's assuming a lot of upfront. So that was an estimate, but it would not be the full $4 million. So by the time we get to the mayor's proposed budget, that's not going to stay in at $4 million, because even if we move forward, even if we paid cash, it would only be that last 3 to 4 months of the fiscal year that would potentially have some construction cost in it. So, and that's assuming that we are right out of the gate July 1 with an RFQ and everything. So, but again, it's important to them. They want to keep it at the forefront of everyone's mind. They want to provide a great service. And in addition to that, they have some smaller capital requests. Once EMS moves into their new station, they've put about $50,000 in here to renovate the quarters where EMS was, just maybe some fresh paint, new carpets, and different things that need to be done. Station 2 bedroom renovation, Station 3 flooring, the all-terrain vehicle. And of course, beyond anything, save the best for last, their top priority is the ladder truck. It's in their memo. They will talk about it, I know, on the 28th, but their top priority is replacing truck 1. You'll see in the memo for the last 4 years, I think it is, it's been out of service 38% of the time. They're having to sink money into it. When truck 1 is out of service, they have to pull out truck 2, which is a 20-plus old truck that we bought used as a backup. Well, when you bring the backup into service, you have to pour more maintenance money into it. They've got some numbers in their memo for you about inflation, what financing might look like. So we could finance through the company, the dealer. We could finance through a local financial institution to try to get a better rate. There are options to not have to bite off that whole amount at once if council wants to consider that. So I would say that is their number 1A. We have a lot of priorities in the budget of 1A, 1B, but that is definitely their first priority.
Stacy?
Yes.
I might have missed it. How much of a decrease would it be to put a potential new fire station where the EMS station is versus going out to a brand-new site?
I will, I'll defer to Tim if I mess this up, but, when we first started talking about this, of course, years ago, there was a $10 million, we're going to make it our headquarters.
Right.
Obviously, we've scaled back. I think they had it down to about $3 million if we had gone to bid and done it in conjunction with the EMS station. With inflation, and that's what they've done is with inflation, is they're looking at $4 million for the EMS site, I believe. Yeah, okay, so I'm not,
And
so that
Stacy,
is for that site.
and Stacy, in talking
So that's
about,
for that site,
in talking about that if you was going to use that site, you're talking about the plans, and the plans they're making will be something similar to each one.
Yeah,
It just, the cost increase, if you put it on the west side, will be because of all the other.
utility work,
Utility
site work,
works and so on.
obviously.
So,
And, I say we, fire department in conjunction with, I'm sure, fire committee and council, you all will make that final decision on site where it's most needed, but,
Land acquisition, obviously, as
Yes.
well.
Right.
right.
okay.
Thank you.
We will move on to code enforcement. Code enforcement is an interlocal department. This one has a different formula. It is 45% city, 45% county, 5% Sadieville, 5% stamping ground. So we share all of the operating and administrative costs for code enforcement. However, if an abatement occurs, so if they go out and tear down a house, mow a property, board up a house, whatever that abatement may be, if the abatements are inside of city limits, Public Works typically tries to perform those, but we still invoice and try to get our money back on those services, even if Public Works does it. If it goes out in the county, in the past, they've contracted with vendors, but I'll talk about it a little bit. They're also looking to do some of that work themselves with new code enforcement officers. If an abatement occurs, that is billed 100% back to the jurisdiction that it occurred in. They're responsible for that cost. Then, if we bill the property owner and the property owner reimburses us, we take that money, we give it 100% back to the jurisdiction it occurred in. So the abatement expenses stay in their jurisdiction, everything else is shared based on the formula. And they are requesting 2 additional code enforcement officers. Total compensation package for those is about $99,670 for a total of $199,340 for both of those. And we'll move on to the operating and capital budgets. Their fiscal year 2026 request is $640,923, which is a $209,000 increase over last year. As you can see, $199,000 of that is the personnel, and then they are requesting a mower and trailer so that they can perform some of those county abatements themselves if they get those an additional officer or 2. And if they do get an additional officer or 2, they'll require a new vehicle lease as well. And they did decrease their abatement cost by about $25,000 because we will no longer be using, or hope not to be using, as much the third-party vendors. We'll still have to have third-party vendors if there need to be asbestos inspections or things of that nature, or something that the staff can't perform. But for the most part, they're hoping to reduce those abatement costs. Any questions on code enforcement?
They're doing in abatement costs, is that all of the differences between last year and this year in operating?
It's part of, there were some line items that increased to offset, so if they get new additional officers, they had additional uniform, additional travel training, so the decrease of 25, then there were some lines that increased. It ended up being a net of 7,000
Right.
on the operating.
Right.
But, the majority of the increase is the personnel, and
Sure.
so, yes. But if I didn't answer that right, let me know. Or didn't answer your question while you were. Okay. There's no questions about code enforcement, we will move on to public works. Public works staffing, you can see here, obviously, several years ago, we made sure that we didn't lose any of our sanitation staff. We lost a couple through attrition, but, all of the sanitation staff was absorbed into public works with the exception of 2 after they retired or left. We didn't replace. The engineering office's salaries are also reflected in the public works budget, just their salaries, so I have listed them on this staffing. I know there's been talk about a stormwater crew. Robert didn't include that right away, but that is something that, as we talk about that stormwater utility fee, and if it looks like council decides to implement that, then we can start talking about adding that stormwater crew. They do currently, as they can, as they have capability or time, they do stormwater tasks for Eddie right now. As you know, Bell Engineering is working on, I don't want to say the wrong subdivision, I think it's Indian Hills stormwater work plan.
Yes, it is.
The task orders are expected to be done by Public Works, so these are the things to think about as you consider whether or not to do a stormwater utility fee and whether we do or don't, whether or not we feel that additional staff needs to be added for stormwaters only. But as of right now, we do not have a stormwater specific crew. They do it as they have the capacity. So no requested increases from them. Their total budget request is $4,580,277 on the next slide. And that is an increase of $1.1 million over this year. The majority of that increase is capital. They have requested to resurface their parking lot, approximately $180,000. There's a lot of low-lying areas, water's pooling, so they requested that. I believe I have listed their capital request in their highest priority of order, but the gripper trucks run every day, so they have requested replacement for that at $275,000. The street sweeper, he asks for this every year. We've been pushing it down the road because the street sweeper can be funded by a stormwater utility fee. Cleaning the streets, that's a stormwater maintenance function. This particular street sweeper that he wants to purchase also has a vac truck as part of it that can assist with stormwater cleanouts. But the longer we delay the fee, the higher priority it becomes to go ahead and get that piece of equipment one way or the other. The dump truck, we gave him 1 dump truck last year. He had asked for 2, so he is asking for that remaining dump truck this year. He included pictures in last year's budget. They're 20-plus years old. There's a lot of rust spots in the beds and in the body. And the tractor and back wing is his last priority, but that is another piece he requested. In the packet that was emailed out with the memos, he gives you the model year of what they're replacing and everything, so you can look through that. And just continuing to update his fleet with the fleet vehicle replacements.
So will Robert be presenting at some point?
The departments, oh, you mean for the yes.
Yes.
Engineering and Public Works are at the next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, in the scope of those departmental presentations, yes.
And what's his crew number? How many people? Is that on here?
28.
Oh,
Well,
20.
minus the engineer.
Yes.
Okay.
26.
So 25
Oh, there it
are
is.
directly Public Works. 1's clerical staff, and then 2 are the engineering office. So he really has about 25 staff, that's including himself, that can go out in the field and go out and perform work. Well, and one's a mechanic, so obviously the mechanic stays in the garage. So about 24 staff that's broken down by each of their titles. And so. Okay, if there's no other questions about Public Works, we're going to move right into the city engineer. So with the city engineer, the total request, so our city engineer has two budgets that he manages. I've put those one right after the other. The city engineer is Department 10320, lives in the general fund, covered by general revenues. The 2026 request is $895,185, which is a $338,000 increase over the previous year. The bulk of that increase is in the professional services and projects. So I have tried on the right-hand side to outline those. The first thing that he's requested is a road pavement analysis, $30,000. We did this years ago, prior to Eddie's tenure. He's requesting to do it again. This is a tool that can be used. I don't know if is it infrared or what is it, a LiDAR?
Yeah, it's a
say the wrong thing.
truck with a computer system on it,
Okay.
and it shoots it.
So a radar, a LiDAR, I'm probably using the wrong terminology, but we'll,
It takes measurements on the
yes.
pavement. And
It's, and as he said, it's not 100% accurate, but it is a tool that can be used in conjunction with visual assessment, feedback from citizens, and assess the citywide condition of our streets and build that database so that he can use that as a tool to decide which streets to be paved next. General engineering of $80,000. This is small projects that come up in addition to help with project management. The carryover project here is, I believe, Bell Engineering with the Main Street Sidewalk project. It may not be the full $21,000. They will invoice us for part of that. Additional projects, the traffic calming in Indian Hills, continuing the sidewalk cost sharing program at a total of $50,000. The mayor has requested that in addition to the MAP funding that we receive from the state, that we start looking at investing some general fund money into our paving. Going back to 2019, at the time, the useful life of a street is about 20 years. That's pretty much the standard. That doesn't mean with weather and wear and tear that some might not need to be replaced sooner and some take longer, but on average, 20 years. To pave all of our roads on a 20-year cycle would take, at that time, in 2019, about $1 million a year. Back then, we were receiving between $500,000 and $600,000 a year in MAP funds. So the mayor asked just to kind of start that process of starting to contribute some general fund dollars in addition to our MAP funds. We had built up a surplus of MAP funds over the last several years, and Eddie's been trying to spend those down and get those spent and roads paved, so that really on an annual basis we should have our MAP fund allocation and then anything we choose to contribute from the general fund. And with as many street miles as we have, really we should be spending that every year at a minimum. So East Main extended, so going out Main Street across the railroad tracks, doing a project there, widening, smoothing out the road. Obviously that will have to be done in conjunction with the railroad, but there's been a lot of citizen complaints in that area, so Eddie has put a project, some money in there for design, I believe, just to see what we need to do. The Main Street sidewalk rehab, we had initially budgeted $125,000 this year for one phase, and then we were going to do $125,000 in the upcoming year. We're still in the design phase of that, so this is carrying over $125,000 from this year's budget and trying to, once that design's completed, get that project, just get both phases knocked out next year to fix the bricks on the sidewalks downtown. The city entry point signs, this is kind of a placeholder, $150,000. Bruin had done an estimate. We felt it most accurate to put that in the engineer budget, but 5 or 6 signs, about $25,000 or so each, around the city. We want to, part of that general engineering services would be to hire a landscape architect to design them so that even though they may not all be the exact same size, to have some uniformity in design and then to fit each location where that might go. And then a project for Washington Street sidewalks. So any questions about
Yeah,
just,
could none of that, city entry point signs, none of that would be absorbed through tourism?
I'm gonna defer that question to Devin or the mayor.
That, Lori actually, she's brought this conversation up for years. You know, the oldest RFP we have, she drafted back in, I think it was 2019. So I know they're very interested in being part of the conversation. We don't have any kind of dollar commitment or anything like that, but I do know that they wanted to partner on that project. So they will be part of the conversation, but ultimately, you know, we included the full amount in our budget just because we don't
So
have that
this could be
information yet.
less.
It could be, yes.
And I've had, again, had some conversation with Lori. Matter of fact, I approached Lori on this earlier when I brought this to, but with Public Works, is that, you know, the signage, trying to make it more appealing when people come through, because I think that sells our city as well as letting people want to come here and so on. And, like I said, we didn't want nothing really elaborate, but we want something that's a little bit better than what we have right now. Just kind of showcase that. And then she and I did have a conversation. I just kind of let her know what the plan was to do that, and she was very receptive with that. And we'll continue to have a conversation with her on that.
I have a question too, probably for Eddie. The Washington Street sidewalk, where is that?
This is kind of in response to your comment at the city council, and also Devin had noticed. It would be at the corner of, oh shoot, the road name escapes me, but what's the main road that we turn, Chambers over to 25, or over to 460. Yeah,
So-
right where the Amen, past the Amen House.
That's,
Or the new Amen thing. No sidewalks over there.
Right.
Really, there's a lot of walkers over there,
Yeah.
and we've seen a lot of foot traffic meander into the streets.
Yeah.
Yep.
And,
Excellent.
you know, we're hoping to provide something better over there.
That'd be
And
great.
upgrade the ramps too.
And
Yeah.
I think it's good because you know, just for me going over and visiting the Amen House, there's a lot more traffic going over there because there's a lot
That's
of
right.
people who are coming in who are needing of services. So they're getting more people coming in to see them daily. So we want to make sure that that is something that we want to make, they have some safe avenue to get there, because most people who show up there are some of them who just actually walking within distance anyway.
That's right, that's right. But that's what we're trying to accomplish there. Mhm.
Great.
Thank you for the road name there, Devin. I couldn't remember the name of the street, I apologize.
Mayor, you had mentioned in a previous council meeting, we were talking about the sidewalk project on West 460.
Yeah, the TAP grant, yes.
Yeah, so that's all TAP grant, there wasn't any
No.
match
Yeah,
or
yeah,
anything like
yeah,
that?
We matched that, and Stacy can give me the numbers on
Yes.
that, but, yeah, we did. We tried this for years, and we wasn't successful. So we went back and said, okay, so we feel that that's a real big need for those sidewalks on that left-hand side going to town. So we went back and said, let's rework this and kind of see if we can get them to kind of go in. With the match I think we've been doing was like 20%. I think this time we went up to 30%. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was 30%.
Yeah, that number was, I believe, around 800,000 or 900,000.
Yes.
For the match. That was in this year's budget. So that, our match will be transferred to the Capital Projects Fund by June 30. So
Okay.
even if the project hasn't
it'll be
officially
carried
kicked
over.
off,
Yeah, okay.
it'll be transferred at the end of this year. So it won't be a next year budget item.
Okay.
And then the grant portion will live in the grant fund.
Sure.
So
And I
so
think
that will be accounted for.
excuse me, and that would help a lot with the, by helping us getting that, I think, because we bought more into that. I think the
Sure.
state saw that, by us putting a little bit more ante in it, because we tried with 20%, wasn't successful, so we tried with 30%, and we got them to do it because that was something we thought was needed.
And Stacy, you had mentioned that there was a MAP fund balance that we hadn't used.
There was. I believe we started the year with over $1 million that had accumulated over several years. Eddie's been doing his best to spend that down, but it had accumulated even before his tenure.
Sure.
So he had been working to spend that down. we haven't had a chance, we're gonna get together we're gonna have a map hearing soon for the upcoming paving season, and we're gonna see how much of that money was left. Eddie believes we're down to just a few $100,000 now,
Okay.
and we can try to knock a lot of that out this season. And I'll talk more about the map fund a little bit later in the presentation with what our allocation for next year is.
Thank you.
Moving on to the next slide. Staying with Eddie's office is the stormwater operating and capital budgets. This lives in the environmental service fund. We do transfer the money from the general fund, so even though it lives in the environmental services fund, it is still currently covered by general fund dollars. Again, when you look at the amount of these costs and some of the other things that we could do in public works, this is something that could be funded by a stormwater utility fee, should council choose to do that. The total request for stormwater is $1,468,836. We do charge 50% of the city engineer's office, both our engineer and our engineering technician, to stormwater. They spend about half of their time on stormwater related activities. And then you'll see some large swings between operating and projects and capital, and that's because we're trying to clean up our line items. We have a stormwater repairs line item and a stormwater systems line item, and we're trying to use those a little more accurately, where repairs should be those smaller repairs and maintenance, and the stormwater systems capital line items should be more for new or upgraded features. So that's why you see the wild swing and the increase and decrease in operating and capital, is because we're trying to classify those more accurately. For professional services, some of the larger ones, general engineering and the MS4 permit services, $110,000 currently. Strand has our MS4 contract for maintenance of all of that. It may be time to go bid that out soon. That is something that we do bid out every few years. Carryover projects, $46,250 remaining engineering on those. Eddie did go ahead and include the amount for if council chooses to go forward with it, the phase 2 stormwater utility fee. You can at least see the amount and what it would be. Again, that's $234,500 for the development of a fee. Currently, that we had the feasibility fee study with Strand, so this will be an amendment to that contract to continue. It is a 12 to 18 month process. So if council chose to contract and do that, it would take 12 to 18 months to develop the fee, implement an ordinance, and get that started.
So a stormwater utility fee would bring in $234,500, is that what you're saying?
That's what it will cost.
That's what it costs.
Oh, I got
To
you.
pay the consultant to do all that legwork.
Okay.
They have to go.
I was gonna say,
Yeah, they have
not
to go
worth it.
parcel by parcel for the non-residential properties.
okay,
They have to go parcel by parcel
Right.
and determine pretty much what the fee would be for each property. And obviously, they've talked in presentations about developing a credit system, if that's something council wants. There's a lot of factors that go into developing that to make it legally defensible, and to also make sure that we're only generating enough revenue to run our program.
okay.
Because it's never something you want to make a profit on. You want to just generate enough to cover your expenses. Projects and capital, the CCTV, continuing the camera cleaning, is about $75,000. Small storm sewer repairs in various subdivisions or on various streets. You'll see those outlined in Eddie's memo, are $155,000. And the carryover project is mainly the project on Broadway, on South Broadway. So we've gone through most of the design phase on that, but we still have the construction.
Is this Stacy, was this a $99,000 decrease?
It is. Forgot to put my parentheses on there. On that one, it is a decrease.
Yeah,
And again, this is a very project-driven budget. Obviously, we try to do maintenance, repairs, there's a little bit of salaries, but it's very project-driven. At the moment, we've talked a lot about how Eddie would like to be more proactive. We're typically reactive, just trying to maintain as best we can.
So under the salaries and benefits, then, we're only capturing the engineering, we're not capturing any
Yes.
of the Public Works that are doing stormwater
not
kinds of
currently.
things, okay.
It's all covered by general fund dollars right now.
Right, right.
If we had a stormwater utility fee, then if we had a public works crew that was dedicated to stormwater, we would fund the whole crew. If they spent half their time doing stormwater, we would allocate 50%. We would probably allocate a portion of a crew leader, potentially even a portion of Robert if he is overseeing stormwater work. The reason you do see the larger increase in the salaries and benefits line item is because, at Eddie's recommendation, we had previously charged or allocated 25% of the engineering technician to stormwater. But every year I ask Eddie, do you feel like this is still a fair allocation? And he said he should be 50% as well. So that's why you see the increase in salaries and benefits. They're not getting a big raise. It is just an additional 25% allocation of the engineering technician to the stormwater program. Any additional questions about stormwater? Okay, next is dispatch. So our 911 center, this is an interlocal, divided 50-50 between the city and the county. Much like building inspection, you'll see on the next page, there is state revenue that comes in for the 911 center. We do remit half of that revenue to the county, but our 911 fee is solely ours and goes to cover our portion. Currently, their authorized staffing is 27.5. The requested staffing is 32.5. The reason you see the asterisks on the 911 coordinator and the increase and decrease numbers is because even though we need to add a civilian 911 coordinator back to the personnel ordinance, it won't be a negative impact on their budget because the 911 coordinator will actually make a little bit less than the police lieutenant that was overseeing. So not a negative impact on the budget, but it is a personnel change that will have to be made via ordinance if this request is granted. Last year, they requested to change one of their telecommunicators to a shift supervisor. So this year, they're requesting to have that telecommunicator position given back. The cost of a telecommunicator is about $88,330 for the total compensation package. Much like the police department, they have a lot of open records requests. Theirs are actually fairly steady. They've had probably over 400 per year for quite a while now, something obviously that they get. So that position, total compensation is about $94,389. We have been talking to the departments about how we can navigate those needs together, but they did include them as a separate request in their budget. A systems coordinator, there's a lot that I know Lieutenant Moore does right now, and the assistant coordinator and others to manage systems used by the county, probably the accounting functions and some other things. There's more in the memo. I'm not going to try to explain that as best as well as he would, but that position is $94,390, and an assistant TAC coordinator $91,280. And we've talked about the assistant TAC coordinator. The TAC coordinator is a position that coordinates with a lot of outside agencies, county, state, a lot of legal requirements and compliance things that they keep up with. The workload on that employee has been a lot. That employee also occasionally covers the radio. So one of the things we've talked about possibly being creative, if this position were to be granted, they do have 2 vacant part-time communicators right now, telecommunicators. So if this position could potentially relieve some of the administrative duties, but also spend part of their time on the radio, perhaps it could be a combined position. So that's something we've talked about to get creative. Again, nothing's been decided yet, but those are some conversations we're having about how to get creative with these positions.
Sorry, I missed the numbers. The TAC officer total
The assistant
comp-
TAC coordinator, $91,280 for their total compensation.
And the systems administrator?
The systems coordinator was $94,390. Okay.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the next slide. So the dispatch, operating, and capital, I didn't do the total line on the expenses, but you can see the revenue is $4,350,529. That is a combination of the telecommunications fee, the CMRS revenue from the state, and then the city, and then the county picking up their half of the expenses. So total revenues coming in, budgeted next year are $4,350,000. You can see each type of expense. So this year, we had a budget deficit of approximately 166. Next year, the budget deficit is looking like about 479. However, the first few years of having a telecommunications fee, we did build up a surplus of over $1 million. That is a service fee. The city is using that to fund their portion, so we do need to use those funds. We're not at a point yet where we need to talk about that fee and whether or not it's sufficient to cover the city's half. We need to make sure that we've spent down the funds that we've charged to citizens. 2 or 3 years, a couple years down the road, we may need to reevaluate that fee. But for now, we have a sufficient reserve balance in the 911 fund from the first few years of those fees. The reason you're starting to see that deficit go up is we've started paying the big annual maintenance contract to AMK, which is around $500,000 a year. So that started this fiscal year.
What is
So
that?
for the new council members, around, I want to say around 2020, 2019, 2020, the city and the county jointly funded I want to say it was like $11-12 million radio tower project. Upgrading our radio towers, installing new radio towers. I don't remember how many, or somebody else knows, but installing new radio towers. We split the project cost equally. The first, I think, 3 to 5 years of the maintenance were covered in the initial project cost, so we essentially had free maintenance the first 3 years. And then it was the 4th or 5th year, which was this year, starting July 1 of 24. It's about $500,000 per year to AMK. They maintain and upkeep all the tower systems. They maintain and upkeep all the radios. We get battery backups every so often for those radios. They trade out the batteries. I'm sure someone else could explain it all better, but that is year 4 or 5 of that contract is when that maintenance agreement kicked in. So we have a maintenance agreement with AMK on that $12 million radio system. So I'll pause, see if anybody else has any questions about that. But
So I missed the first numbers you were talking about, since they're not on here.
for the revenue,
Yeah.
yes, and I'll get them from the line item they're in here so that I don't mistake them.
You're talking about the 4.3 million reference?
No,
That she started with?
after that.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember what I said after that.
There were 2 other numbers that you ripped off pretty quick, and I was still trying to catch up, that
No.
are not on here, so.
It's okay. That revenue breakdown, just so you do have it, is our 911 fee brings in about $1,608,000. That's our projection for next year. The state CMRS revenue brings in about $450,000. That is the one that we share with the county. We remit half of that revenue to them. And then the county's half of the expenses, we just take the total expenses, divide it by half. The county pays about $2,292,000 of the expenses, and that makes up the revenue. You can find that in the line item report, but those are the numbers that make that up. And then what I was saying is, with the deficit numbers, we have about little over $1 million fund balance in the 911 fund. So we need to spend that down before we consider increasing our 911 fee. And just for reference, currently the 911 fee is $8 per occupied unit per month. And then there's some different formulas for how they calculate hospitals, dorms, apartment buildings, et cetera. But for a single-family residential home, it is $8 per month if the unit is occupied.
So how did we determine the increase for this year of revenue?
Based on collections history is what I've looked at so far. That's why I said the revenue projections are preliminary. I've got some fine tuning to do, but just based on collections history, what we've collected over the last 12 months, an average of that. But GMWSS might be able to give me some additional information on how many units we're charging that to currently.
Yeah, because
So-
I'd be interested in seeing what the numbers look like when you compare Holden's numbers of what development proposals are to see what that revenue growth truly is.
And the units have to be completed and they
Sure.
have to be occupied
Right,
before
right.
we charge this, but yes, it will.
But they're, when they get them done, they're gonna be occupied
Yes,
pretty
yes.
quickly.
Yes, so as they request water services and garbage services, that's when those fees are imposed. So. Okay. Any other questions on just those flat numbers? For dispatch, they've requested a few small capital things. The main one you'll see, kind of mirroring what PD did, there's 18,500 in there for an architectural needs assessment. Again, they're out of room in the dispatch center. We've talked to both departments about, even though they would each fund their own portion of a needs assessment, going out in a singular request for qualifications to get a singular architect, since they are all on the same campus. And the city also owns, I think, a little piece of property across from the police department on Bourbon Street. So just kind of assessing that whole area and what we can do for those departments. But we want to do that in sync with each other so that all those needs can be considered. Any other questions about dispatch? Okay. Moving on to the next slide, our cemetery staffing. Cemetery is also funded 50-50, city and county. This one, we do not remit the revenue to the county, but at the end of the year, we take total revenue less total expenses and basically split the difference on what those actuals end up being. So we don't, so that is how we operate this one. Yes?
So what type of revenue are we talking
What type of
about?
revenue? We have interment services, funeral services. They're preparing the grave sites, putting the tents up, that kind of thing. They set the foundation for the headstones. They don't install the headstones, the companies bring those in, but they do lay the foundations for the headstones. And then for so long as we have lots available, lot sales. So, and then there is some money that was put in trust from individuals who passed away years ago. So we have a little bit of investment earnings on those trusts. It's very small, but those were in place, have been in place for years. That called Perpetual Care Trust. No additional staffing requested at the cemetery. They've been able to alleviate the use of, or eliminate the use of the temporary staffing help with the positions that we've given them in the last year or two. They finally got their last position filled, so Jean assured me that we shouldn't need the temporary help going forward. So on to the next slide for the cemetery operating budget. The revenue total is $758,400. However, that does include the city's portion and the county's portion. So cemetery services are estimated around, right now, around $96,000. Lot sales around $150,000, and we get about $5,000 or $6,000 from the investment income, and then we take the expenses, subtract whatever revenue we've collected for the year, and the city and county fund the difference. Right now, we're projecting that the city and county will each fund $253,200, but that will be our portion. So that's all in the revenue total. So that's a transfer from the general fund to the cemetery fund for us, and then the county pays their half. So the cemetery fund is always balanced. We always make that fund whole. So we make sure that the revenues equal the expenses, since they don't have another source of revenue. Small capital request from Jean, just a lowering device top, is miscellaneous small equipment, weed eaters, et cetera. But we are carrying over in the fiscal year 25 budget. We had put in $200,000 for land acquisition. We haven't completed that yet. We anticipate that will happen after July 1, so pushing that expense to fiscal year 26. And again, the cemetery is running out of space. I believe Gene has told us he cannot sell more than 4 lots together at this time. So if someone wants to come in with a large family buy lots, he cannot sell more than 4 together at this time. I believe the last time we talked to him, it was around 3 to 5 years max before we ran out of space. There is property near the cemetery that is ripe for expansion, that makes sense to expand. It has the Land and Water Conservation Fund restrictions on it. So the reason we have the $200,000 in for land purchase is we have to purchase a piece of property equal in value that will be approved. I don't know which state agency it is, but we have to transfer the restrictions to that other piece of property. Essentially, the other property will become a park, and then we can remove the restrictions from the current property that's adjacent to the cemetery and expand. I'll defer to Devin on any additional questions on that, but that's the general process, and it is a process.
Yeah, I don't have much to add other than it's just called a conversion, and it's a pretty cumbersome process. But the issue we've run up against is ultimately you have to buy new land. You can't use land that you currently own. So that creates an impediment of just finding the right property to transfer that to meet the appraisal standards. It's not a typical appraisal. It's I forget what the type of appraisal is called, but it's a heightened standard of appraisal that you have to satisfy that you're transferring it to property of, I think it's equal or greater value, so.
So, since it can't be existing property, can it be maybe a developer's property that is donating it to the city? If it meets the requirements?
I think as long as it appraises at the right value, I think it can be donated. We can look at that though.
Okay, if there's no further questions about the cemetery, we'll go on to the next slide. So these are the various interlocal budgets. Copies of the county, parks, planning, were all included in the packet that was emailed yesterday. So feel free to peruse those at your leisure for more detail. But I have broken them down by department. So we have the ambulance, EMS, electrical inspection, animal shelter, emergency management, the Great Crossing Park Director. Those are all county-run interlocals. We fund all of them 50-50 except for the animal shelter, we fund the operating cost at 50-50, but we only pay for 2 of the animal control officers. We don't contribute to the director's salary or the others, so we pay for 2 animal control officer salaries and split the other operating expenses 50-50. You'll be able to see on their spreadsheet that's included in that packet how they break that out. And for Great Crossing Park, I want to say it's about 25% that we agreed to fund on that park director. Then we have planning and zoning, Georgetown Scott County Parks and Rec. You'll see that is their operating budget, the $1,685,813. You'll see Ed Davis Center. Ed Davis Center is solely funded by the city. So the $189,000 is 100% what it costs to fund Ed Davis outside of the small amount of revenue that they receive at the center. And that is solely city funded. The Parks Capital, that is our portion. That was presented, I believe, to you Monday night at the council meeting. So that is half of the 25-26 request that Drew presented. And then an estimated budget on the Revenue Commission. The Revenue Commission is funded, I believe, 40% city, 40% county, 20% schools, according to our tax rates. We pay accordingly. So when you look at ambulance and electrical inspection, that is just our half of the expense because the city, or the county, I'm sorry, holds and manages those departments' budgets. So, any questions on the interlocals?
So just as a point of reference, do we know or can we get what any headcount increases for the interlocals, just as a reference point, not that
Yeah,
we...
for the county, I know, I'd have to go back and look and see if it's on there, but the county did include a lot of notes to the side in their budget that was emailed out yesterday. I know for ambulance in particular, they're purchasing 2 new ambulances, so that's a big reason for the increase. They've not settled on a final COLA. It'll probably be somewhere between 3 and 3.5%, but they've not settled on a number that's final yet. But if there's not headcount in there, then we can talk about it. And of course, obviously, I don't know if Parks added any headcount in theirs.
Right.
A decrease in headcount. I don't believe planning, should
Yes, we
It's-
proposed several positions.
Okay, so that is in their memo. If you don't find the information you need in those memos, let me know and I will reach out and get that. Any other questions about the interlocal budgets? Okay. Next is, we're gonna talk more about the general government, saved it for last. But the city hall staffing, you can see all the various department staffs, unchanged, no new requests for next year. And so I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on that. We've obviously added a few new positions over the years, so over the last couple of years, so we're giving those positions time to, take some of the workload off and then see how our needs are before requesting any new positions. We're gonna talk about, move on to the general government operating, yes. The total requested budget for, general government is $2,864,767. There's a decrease of $356. I'm going to go back and look and see what that is on the staffing. Shouldn't be a big decrease. Oh, yes, I made a note. The salaries and benefits is decreasing because when council added the $500,000 to add to the medical insurance fund, I put that in general government rather than breaking it down by department because it was just to get the fund back up. So that is why there's a $500,000 decrease. So when you look at the general government detail line items and you look at the medical and hospital line item, that's where the majority of that decrease is. So it's not a decrease in salaries or a decrease in positions or anything like that. It is a decrease in the medical and hospital. It's going from about 671 to about 177, so that's the majority of that decrease. And then professional services, I didn't provide the full breakdown. That is one of our larger expenses, but payroll processing comes out of our professional services. We use a third-party processing firm that we pay per payroll. That's one of the things that you all approved recently was to change how council's payroll is processed. The Human Resources is asking for an additional benefits platform. Right now, we use a separate benefits platform provided by Assured Partners. So there's a lot of import manual entry. They're requesting for more efficiency to have our benefits platform integrated with our payroll system so that everything is seamless, less room for error, making sure that obviously everyone's paychecks and deductions are right out of the gate rather than having any import or manual entry errors between the third-party software and the payroll system. Also coming out of professional services is online employee training, legal services, annual audit services, and miscellaneous. On the next slide, I just wanted to break down because our largest line item right now is information technology. It doesn't have its own budget right now. This is all in the computer hardware software account, but our information IT liaison has requested that I create some additional line items for better tracking, but I wanted to break that down for you because it is such a large line item so that you can see a lot of the things that council's approved over the last year or two. Our managed service contract with NetGain, it does include things like my accounting software, the website services. There's a couple of carryover projects you had approved in this year's budget for a cybersecurity assessment and disaster recovery solution. Due to some other things that became higher priority, like replacing servers, those projects have been delayed and will be pushed to the next year budget. We talked a lot in December about the Microsoft GCC licensing, so we're carrying over some of that project cost and then the ongoing license for that. The biggest portion of this, other than our managed service contract, is hardware, replacing firewalls, switches, computer replacements, trying to stay up to date on that. So that's the biggest portion of that, the $122,000. I won't go into any more detail, but if you have questions about any of this, please feel free to send me questions. I will get them answered. I'm not the IT expert, but I will get them answered.
Question.
Yes.
So with City Hall upgrade, and
Yes.
so is everything built into that contract? Is there any additional fit up that's necessary, especially from an IT perspective, that's not already included in that project?
I think there's a couple of things. I believe council approved the change order in December for some of the AV wiring and things that need to be done for AV. but there will still be the purchase of some AV equipment that needs to be done. And our IT liaison did include that in her spreadsheet, as well as a security system. However, we hope that we'll be able to take that out of the project budget rather than having to add an additional budget. So that's why those costs weren't added on here. But right now, we have a contingency balance. Of course, it's also our furniture and fixtures balance, but we're hoping that there'll be enough there to cover furniture, fixtures, and those additional AV equipment and security system. Those are the two things that I know of that were not in the original contract that would need to be added.
The infrastructure to incorporate those things is included in the project, but the scoping and actual procurement of a security solution, and then same thing on the AV is still, that's something that is separate and still in the works.
Stacy, do you know if the managed services contract with NetGame, is that a yearly contract?
With the last action that council took,
Yeah.
that contract was extended to April of '26.
Okay.
So that is when that contract will be up for renewal again. So there were some additional services added that council approved recently that it was originally set to expire in September. The new services we added were a 12-month contract, so to keep it all on the same date, everything was extended to April of '26.
Okay.
Okay. On the next slide, council and clerk each has their own department, but very small expenses, personnel. For the clerk's office, the general fund portion is 75% of their salary and benefits. We also use the alcohol fund to pay a portion because our city clerk is our ABC administrator. So 75% is charged to the general fund, 25% is charged to the alcohol fund. And the reason you see the reduction on the cell phones is rather than taking cell phones, city council members chose to take the reimbursement, the monthly reimbursement, so it's rolled into the salaries and benefits line item. So, any questions? The travel and training, I will make a note. This was something actually Devin talked to me about. They're researching some of those different levels of, I think, certifications that council can get. So if we need an additional budget, we've typically not used anywhere near the 6,000 travel and training in the past, but if there are council members interested in getting that, we'll increase that budget.
Yeah, I'll expand on that a little bit. There's been some interest from council members, and frankly, we brought it up when this legislation went through, and it just never kind of came to fruition. But there's legislation that allows you to develop elected official training incentive pay. So ultimately, that would incentivize this council, this mayor, future council, or this council, I think, I don't know if it's for mayors actually, and future councils to seek out more training. Obviously, we pay for the training as well, but it incentivizes and provides that compensation if somebody has to take off work or just for your time. So those are good programs that a lot of cities have implemented. So we're researching that right now, and should be able to include at least a filler in terms of total amount that could be utilized there.
Any other questions about the council or clerk budgets? If not, we'll move on to the next slide. And these are just some other miscellaneous general fund budget items. The Affordable Housing Office is also an interlocal. Currently, the city's portion of the salary and benefits is ARPA funded, and we will be able to use ARPA funding for one more year. The county does reimburse half, and then we use ARPA funding for our half. After next year, we'll have to absorb that back into the general fund budget for our portion. Citywide utilities, there's a very small note down there, but that includes street lights, signal lights, the water hydrants, or the fire hydrants, not water hydrants, fire hydrants. That includes, we still have maintenance on Sims Road, landfill. There's a leachate system that GMWSS pumps out, and if it rains a lot, the bills are really high. So it fluctuates greatly. We could have a $50,000 a year for leachate expense, or we could have a $150,000 a year. It just depends on the weather, so we do our best to estimate that. The community services grants, that has been broken out between, as our policy stated, we're looking at those more kind of quasi-governmental type agencies. We didn't require them to apply, airport, Scott County United, tourism, those were pulled out of that amount. So last year, our community services grants was $291,300. The $300,000 is a placeholder. We are still accepting those applications. After we adopted the new policy, we opened that window, and it closes April 25th. So as those come in, the mayor is going to share them with the finance committee. We've only gotten, I think, maybe 5. So we'll share those with the finance committee, and the mayor will review those for any final recommendations. So when you're looking through the line item budget, you'll see they don't have numbers in their individual lines yet because we're waiting on those applications to come in. The policy did set a maximum of $400,000. I used $300,000 for these purposes just because it was close to what we allocated those organizations last year. So, but the policy set a maximum of $400,000. So, community services other. Go back and look and see what that is. Our contribution to tourism that we chose to make in lieu of having a Main Street program. So that's for our downtown marketing, etc. Chamber dues. Trying to think what else is in there. Let's see. Wrong department. So historic Georgetown, the airport, Scott County United, our sister city, community cleanup, which is like our Toyota Super Recycling Day, fireworks, some of the things that we just do annually for community services. The transfers to other funds, the $1,722,036 that you see there, that is the transfer for stormwater and cemetery. So right now, those are the only 2 funds. General fund is transferring to cover. You see a large reduction because of our capital. We had a lot of capital this year that we had to transfer money for, so that's why that decreased. Also, we no longer have to make a transfer to the business park fund to cover the debt service because that will be paid off this fiscal year. And then you'll see our other debt service line, which includes the police department, the refinancing bond, and the Cephaletta Aquatic Center. We only have 1 more year on that. It'll be paid off next fiscal year. And then the capital that you see there was the land purchases that we made at the end of December. So that's why that went to 0 this year, because that was a unique thing. So any questions about some of these other various line items? Okay. The next thing, this is kind of a very preliminary snapshot. This is something we will get into more at the main presentation on May 12th. We will look more at that bigger picture of what is our current fund balance, what is once the mayor has developed his final proposed budget, whatever impact that is expected to have on the fund balance going forward, how that relates to our fund balance policy. You'll see a lot more of that big picture at that presentation in May. But based on what was requested and very preliminary revenue projections, I broke it down, preliminary revenue for the general fund, and then I've added up all the salaries, the operating, the interlocal, those other general fund items. So on the operating side, with all the requests, we're about $695,000 short. And then there's capital items at the bottom. I wanted to show those separately. There is $11.3 million of capital items requested in this budget. So I just wanted to separate that out so you could kind of get a little bit more of an idea of the impact. Obviously, these are things as the mayor goes through, he'll consider. The last time I presented to council, we were showing that we had around $2 million to play with before we got to that 30% minimum. So those are things to consider as we're talking about what capital we can fund, whether or not there are, whether it be bonding, whether it be local financial institution loans that we want to obtain for things like the ladder truck that we can look at. So just wanted to show that a little bit. Again, we'll talk more about that big picture on May 12th. The next slide is those preliminary general fund projections. Most of this I have rolled up into their overall categories. Revenues are on the very first page of the line items, so you can see a little more what makes up those accounts. The revenues that I'll really be focusing on the most for additional massaging of the revenue projections will be employee withholding, net profits, investments, and the insurance premium taxes. Devin and I met with Jack Connor and Holden and Chase just to kind of talk about some of the things going on in our community. And so we're going to do the best we can to try to gauge when a lot of those projects are coming online. We know we get payroll tax revenue from construction. Then eventually, once those developments are constructed, we're either going to get some property tax revenue, which is minimal, or we're going to get payroll tax revenue, potentially some additional net profits. So, but for now, a lot of it's going to be construction and payroll from the construction. So we're going to try to assess all of that. And then with net profits, again, when I give my next update, if it's not at the next meeting, it'll definitely be in conjunction with budget presentation. But we'll talk about, net profits and some revenue. I need to talk to Scott about some revenue we've received and how much of it I can count on actually being revenue I can recognize, or whether it's a credit that's owed back to our taxpayers. If it's revenue we could recognize, there may be some revenue that can help offset some of those capital expenses. But stay tuned on that.
On that, Stacy, so the budget is $3,250,000 for net profits.
That's the current year budget.
Yeah. And are you comfortable saying whether you think that's right or not?
I will say generally what we get on a reoccurring basis for net profits, it used to be around 2.5. It's slowly grown each year. So 3 million, 3.5 to 4 is probably where we're at now from what we get on a recurring basis. There's swings, but generally that's what we can count on each year. And again, those are ones I'm going to look at, try to fine tune a little bit more, get a little bit of input with Scott. I haven't had a chance to sit down and talk with him yet, but we'll be looking at those over the next couple of weeks and trying to fine tune those. And there's some revenues that, like the franchise fees for cable, they're actually going down because people are not, they're cutting the line, cutting the cord, is cutting the cable, whatever.
So on this particular chart,
Yes.
Can we add a column of fiscal year 25 actual?
We don't, but I can add that in for the.
Okay.
It is in the line item by line
Okay.
item. You can see that in
Yeah.
here. You can see in the line item report you have 2023, 2024,
Yeah.
and year-to-date actuals.
Right,
Yeah.
So you do have that for each individual
Right.
line item in here.
yeah. But for this, it gives
yeah.
you something to actually compare to, other than projected budget or budget
Yeah.
versus projected budget. Okay, this is what we really got.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Okay, and the last slide, this one's short and sweet, just a few of the other special revenue funds. The alcohol fund we talked about, this is one, the revenue has been, it's kind of stagnated or even leveling out, decreasing. I'll try to talk to Tracy a little more. I know we did have a local distillery close in the last year or two that was down on Water Street. I don't know if there's been anything else that's closed. I'm gonna try to get a little more information from Tracy on that, but it's not been increasing for several years. Our alcoholic beverage, by the drink, by the package, regulatory fees increased, and then they've kind of leveled off and have even started tapering a little bit. That funds, in the upcoming budget, it will fund 14.5% of the police salaries and benefits, only for sworn officers. I don't charge clerical staff or school resource officers, or even the part-time staff to that, but just the full-time sworn officers are charged to that. And then again, 25% of the clerk's office, since they serve as our ABC administrator and collect those funds. As mentioned before, the MAP fund, we did receive, council will be approving it sometime in the next couple of meetings, but our municipal road aid agreement for fiscal year 26 has $866,983, which is an increase over last year. As you can see, The current year, the expense budget was 2 million because we had about 1.2 million of carryover money. We don't anticipate having anywhere near that for the next year. So before we count on any carryover in next year's budget, Eddie and I are gonna see where we're at, and he's gonna try to spend as much as he can before June 30. So, and then the LGEA fund, that kind of supplements the MAP fund. A lot of times it's used for pavement striping, kind of just goes along with it. It's the coal and mineral severance fund. It kind of fluctuates from year to year, but we get that money from the state. And all of the project-specific budgets will be included on the May 12th presentation. All of our carryover grant balances, our carryover ARPA funding, and any carryover capital projects will all be included in the May 12th.
I think this was just passed by the city, was the medical marijuana and not the county? Is that correct?
You mean on the ballot?
On the ballot?
Yeah,
It
both,
passed
yeah.
both.
It passed for both, okay. Where will that be placed? And did we, by lottery, get a dispensary or two in Scott County?
I think in the county.
Or is it only in the
One.
county and not in the city? We got one in the city? So, do we anticipate in what year that we may get some revenue from that, or how is that gonna work?
Did we assess a fee yet?
I think that's one thing we're gonna do, we gotta figure out if we're gonna do a fee yet and all that. Now, that has not been determined.
It's not been determined?
No, that's not been
So
determined.
the state doesn't determine
No.
that? We will determine that?
Yes, yes.
I believe so, but I've
Yes,
only
that-
been on
yes,
the
that-
peripheral of those conversations.
Yeah, we just might
but-
keep that in mind as a future revenue stream.
According to my understanding, that we set that fee.
Okay.
And that's if we wanna have a fee.
Yeah.
And that's up to us.
Right.
And I think
Yeah.
they may be, correct me if I'm wrong, Devin, they may be more in the sense of a license type fee rather than a, I'm not sure. Yeah,
I
we're-
won't speak to it
we're-
because
we've had very
I'm not
preliminary-
recalling.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Conversations about those, so I shouldn't speak to that.
might as well have a fee.
So that's something we have to look into. You know, just, you know, we'll do some little research on it and see where we are on that.
Yeah,
But we do have to take action.
okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you so much.
Well,
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
yeah, a lot of work.
I'll tell you what, I don't know where you're gonna find anywhere in the state of Kentucky, somebody as influenced as her on this, and I'll tell you what makes my job a whole lot easier when you got somebody that knows exactly where most of all the money is, and that's always important, and keeps me out of hot water or out of jail or whatever, with the government. So, thank you, as always, Stacy, for what you do in this presentation. So if no other business to be brought with this council, we stand adjourned.